No one noticed when she was bought. No gavel cracked the air. No shouts, no names. Just a quiet nod, a raised hand, and a life traded like it was nothing. But what she did after that, no one saw it coming. Cold rain traced jagged trails down. The windshield of an old, dented car, a rust-colored Civic barely clinging to life in the back lot of a forgotten gas station. The parking lot smelled of wet gravel, burnt oil, and old paper. Inside the car, a woman sat motionless, her breath fogging the glass as the world dripped outside. Her name was Leah. Her hoodie swallowed her shoulders. Her fingers were hidden deep in the sleeves, knuckles white with quiet tension. Behind her, a soft wheeze rose and fell. The breath of her 6-year-old daughter, Nora, curled beneath 2 faded blankets. The girl's tiny chest heaved like it was lifting bricks. Even asleep, it sounded like she was struggling to breathe. Through a pinhole, Leah didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the dashboard, though she saw nothing. Her bones were too tired to feel. Her heart, too used to breaking. The car smelled of damp socks, cheap fast food wrappers, and Nora's strawberry. Shampoo, the scent clinging to the fabric of their lives. Leah hadn't slept in a bed in 22 nights. They'd been evicted just after Nora's last asthma attack. The landlord had slipped the paper under the door with no knock. Since then, they'd been surviving in this car, washing at the church shelter on 8th Street, begging change for hot dogs, and collecting cans in a shopping cart Leah chained to a fence post at night. The nights had turned cruel. Fall was folding into winter with sharp fingers, and duct tape on the rear window barely held out the cold. That morning, the tape gave up. Now, a steady draft kissed the side of Nora's face as she slept. Leah turned, her hoodie pulling tight at her neck, and gently adjusted the blanket over Nora's cheek. The girl didn't stir. Her skin was pale, her lips dry. This wasn't always her life. Leah used to serve hash browns and coffee at a diner called Red Moon down on Jefferson. Her boss was gruff but fair. They had a 1-bedroom apartment above a nail salon, and their neighbor, Miss Debbie, would watch Nora on weekends when Leah worked double shifts. But then came the cuts. First, fewer hours, then no hours. Then, a sealed envelope and a mumbled apology about keeping the place afloat. That day had rained too, hard, angry rain that matched the knot in Leah's stomach. She'd applied for every form of help she could. SNAP, Medicaid, housing. But the systems moved like molasses, and asthma didn't wait. After Nora's pneumonia last winter, inhalers became non-negotiable. But at $56 a pop, they might as well have been diamonds. From missed rent to eviction. From couch hopping to parking lot camping. Leah felt herself shrinking, shedding pieces of dignity just to stay afloat. Pride was a luxury. Survival was the only thing left. Then came a knock on the window. She jumped, hands flying to the wheel, heart spiking. But it was just Rick, the night guard from the liquor store next door. He wore a weathered windbreaker and carried a plastic bag. "You're still out here?" he asked, his voice low, like he didn't want to scare her. "Chicken sandwich tonight." Leah cracked the window. "Thanks," she murmured. Rick never stayed, never asked why. He just nodded and walked back into the dark, his flashlight dancing across puddles. Leah opened the bag and steam rose, warm and soft like a hug. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she split the sandwich in two, wrapped half in a napkin, and tucked it near Nora's backpack. The girl would need it more. The next morning was no better. The rain had stopped, but gray clouds still blanketed the sky like a dirty quilt. Leah started the car. It coughed, then roared awake. She drove slowly to the downtown help center. They sat in hard folding chairs for 3 hours, Nora's head against her chest, her breathing rough like a broken whistle. "No beds left," the woman behind the desk finally said, her voice empty of hope. "But here," she slid a pamphlet across. "Emergency medical help. Maybe they'll do something. By noon, Leah stood in the grocery store, staring at inhalers locked in a case. Even with food stamps, even with luck, she couldn't afford one. She walked out empty-handed. That night, Nora woke choking. Leah rocked her in her arms in the cold, humming broken lullabies and whispering prayers to a God she wasn't sure listened anymore. When Nora finally passed out, damp curls sticking to her forehead, Leah pressed her own head to the steering wheel. And this time she cried, but silently, so her daughter wouldn't hear. 2 days later, Leah's life shifted with a conversation she never saw coming. She met Vanessa at a free clinic tucked between 2 abandoned storefronts. The building smelled like hand sanitizer and old vinyl chairs. Vanessa sat next to her, sharp suit, polished nails, perfume so expensive it clashed with the tired circles beneath her eyes. Something about her seemed both tired and dangerous. They waited in silence for nearly an hour before Vanessa spoke. "You've got the look," she said casually. Leah turned, confused. "What look?" "The look of someone drowning," Vanessa said, without missing a beat, but too proud to scream. Leah forced a bitter smile and looked away. Vanessa leaned in, whispering like they were co-conspirators. "There's another way, you know, not welfare, not handouts." Leah stiffened. "If you're about to talk to me about escort work—" "No," Vanessa interrupted. "Nothing like that. This is discreet, private, a contract. You don't sleep with strangers for money. You agree to something far simpler." Leah frowned. "What are you saying?" "You'd be giving someone a chance to be a parent. They take care of everything. You live in safety, get paid well, walk away when it's done. No shame, no strings." Leah started to stand. Then Vanessa said the one thing that froze her mid-motion. "Your daughter will get full medical care, immediately." That night, parked by the old freight tracks, Leah couldn't sleep. Nora lay curled beside her in the back seat, clutching her worn-out teddy bear, a faint whistle still in her breath. Could this be real? She thought about all the applications she'd filled, the lines she'd stood in, the people who hadn't even looked her in the eye. No one ever said yes, no one ever helped. Maybe it was time she helped herself. 2 days later, with hands trembling, she made the call. A man answered. His voice was clipped, neutral. He gave her instructions like reading from a script. "You'll take a bus to Halston City. Someone will meet you. You'll be evaluated. If selected, you'll be introduced to a client." "What about my daughter?" Leah asked. "She'd be taken to a private children's center, safe, clean, monitored, state-of-the-art medical staff. She want for nothing." Leah hung up the phone and stared at it for a long time. The next morning, she bought 2 bus tickets with the last crumpled bills in her purse. At the terminal, she fed Nora crackers and juice from a vending machine. The trip took 20 hours. Nora slept most of the ride, head nestled in her mother's lap, small hand clinging to Leah's sleeve. Every few minutes, Leah placed a hand on her daughter's chest, counting the shallow, hurried breaths. Halston was dry, colder than she expected. At the station, a man in a dark suit greeted them. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't smile. They were taken to a sleek glass building on the edge of the business district. Leah filled out forms with numb fingers, disclaimers, health screenings, silence agreements. That evening, they came for Nora. Leah clung to her child like someone trying to memorize a heartbeat. A nurse in blue scrubs reassured her she'd be comfortable. She'd have her own bed, toys, even lessons. Leah knelt, brushing hair from Nora's forehead. "I'll come back for you," she whispered. "I promise." Nora didn't cry. She just held on tight. That night, Leah was taken to a high-rise hotel and shown to a suite filled with things that didn't feel real. Silk dresses, high heels, a vanity full of makeup. Someone handed her a schedule and said, be ready by 8. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. The dress clung to her figure. The makeup disguised the exhaustion, but her eyes betrayed it all. She practiced standing tall, face blank. She wasn't doing this for them. She was doing it for Nora. At 8 sharp, they led her into a ballroom that sparkled like a jewel box. Chandeliers dripped gold light. Gentle classical music hummed like a secret. Along one wall stood 10 women, silent, numbered, beautiful, in ways that didn't feel like their own. Leah was given number 12. When her number was called, she stepped forward. Spotlights made her blink. She held her chin high. The bidding began. First, a voice from the right, 20. Then another, smoother, 30. Silence. Then a low voice from the back, 50. Heads turned. A tall man, silver-haired, stood with a cane at his side. His face was unreadable. No one else spoke. Sold, came the host's voice. Leah was led behind the curtain. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't flinch. A woman handed her an envelope, thick with cash. "You leave tonight," she said. Leah nodded, not for herself. For Nora. That night, the city lights stretched like scattered fireflies beneath the car, flickering behind tinted windows. Leah sat in the back seat, spine stiff, hands clenched tight in her lap. She didn't shiver from the cold. The interior was warm, but her skin prickled all the same. Beside her, the man who had bought her said nothing. He didn't glance in her direction. He hadn't spoken since they left the hotel. He sat composed, back straight, his sharp black coat perfectly pressed, a silver-tipped cane resting near his knee. Everything about him felt clinical, distant, like a man who operated in precision and silence. The car moved like it belonged to the shadows, smooth, soundless, unbothered by the wet roads or the lives it passed by. Outside, Denver glittered like a dream Leah didn't belong to anymore, a city she had entered as a desperate mother and was now leaving as something else. Her thoughts circled one image, Nora's face pressed against her shoulder, her little fingers grasping her mother's shirt. That final hug had been too short, too soft. She hadn't cried, just blinked slowly, as if saving her strength. Leah had whispered, "I'll come back for you," but the words still echoed in her chest, unfinished. She had no address, no phone number, no schedule. Just the word of people who wore tailored suits and didn't blink when they talked about children like contracts. Her stomach cramped, not from fear, though that was there, but from hunger. The last thing she'd eaten was a half-stale sandwich from a vending machine almost a full day ago. Her hands twitched, then stilled. The car dipped into an underground tunnel. It spiraled downward until it reached a smooth cement garage. They pulled into a space marked with nothing but a single white X the engine cut. Still, the man beside her didn't speak. The driver opened the door. Leah stepped out, the air chilled and sharp. The man followed silently. Together, they entered a private elevator lined in brushed steel. No buttons, no music. Just the sound of breath and rising metal. When the doors slid open, another woman stood waiting. Tall, tightly composed, wearing a slate gray suit and carrying a digital tablet pressed to her chest. She didn't smile. "Miss James," she said, "please follow me." Leah followed without a word. They moved down a long corridor padded in carpeting so thick it silenced every footstep. The lighting was warm but dim, designed to soothe. At the end, wide double doors opened slowly on their own. Inside was a room that looked like it had stepped out of a magazine. Soft pink and gold hues spilled from shaded lamps. Plush armchairs lined the walls. A vanity sat near a tall mirror, stocked with powders, brushes, lipsticks arranged in delicate rows. Perfumed air hung around the space, subtle but sweet, like jasmine and linen. 3 other women already waited, each standing apart, silent. Their faces were calm but alert, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Leah didn't speak. Neither did they. A new woman approached, this one wearing black slacks and a headset. She motioned Leah into a dressing room. Hanging on a padded hanger was a midnight blue gown. Modest in design but undeniably expensive. Below it, heels the color of sand weighted, solace untouched. On the vanity, jewelry, perfume, a small card that read, "You are guest no 12. Leah washed her face in the sink, the cold water shocking her awake. She barely recognized her reflection. Her eyes looked older. Her lips were pale. Her face had thinned from too many skipped meals and too little sleep. She applied the makeup slowly, following instinct, not habit. Her hands trembled slightly, but she focused on the task. One brush stroke at a time. One breath at a time, the woman in the headset returned. She pinned a tiny silver badge to Leah's dress. "You're number 12. Don't speak unless addressed. Don't engage guests. You're not here to charm." "This is not entertainment." Leah blinked. "Not even a smile?" The woman's reply was cold. "No, this isn't a cocktail party. This is a transaction." The words hollowed something inside her. She nodded. They were led through a private hallway. On the other side was a ballroom that shimmered like gold melted onto marble. A quartet played something gentle in the corner. Chandeliers glittered like ice overhead. Dozens of men in tailored suits stood in loose clusters, sipping drinks, murmuring low conversations. No one wore name tags. No one needed to. Leah and the others stood along a curved line, each woman behind a nearly invisible stripe of black. Woven into the floor, a hush settled over the room. One by one, numbers were called. Women stepped forward. There was no stage, no auctioneer's hammer, no loud voices. Just hand gestures, nods, subtle tablet clicks. The currency of this place wasn't money, it was power, silent, vast, and deeply unkind. When Leah's number was called, her pulse leapt. Number 12. She stepped forward, her breath locked tight behind her ribs. The spotlight hit her skin like a flash of fire. She couldn't see the crowd, just silhouettes beyond the haze. Silence. Then a hand rose near the left wall. A soft nod. 40. A murmur, another voice deeper, firm. 50. That voice made her spine stiffen. She couldn't place why. But it held authority, the kind that bent rooms without raising its tone. No other offers followed. "Sold," someone whispered. Behind her, her vision blurred for a second. The same handler led her out of the ballroom. Into another room, sterile and cold. A man in a black suit waited with a folder already opened. He didn't introduce himself. The papers were simple. She would live at a private estate for the duration of the pregnancy. All her daughters. Medical care would be paid. She would receive a deposit immediately, the remainder after delivery. No custody, no questions, no contact with the child. Any breach of terms would nullify everything. She signed. Not for the money. For Nora, another car waited for her downstairs. Sleeker than the last. Black as coal, with windows so dark they devoured the city outside. They drove for over an hour. Away from the noise. Away from lights. Into wilderness and winding roads. The world outside faded into pine trees and frost. Snow began to fall, soft, hesitant. The headlights cut through flakes like stars crashing around them. Finally, the car turned onto a private drive. It twisted upward, rising like a breath being held. At the top stood a house of glass and stone, beautiful, sharp, untouchable. The door opened before she knocked. It was him. The man from the auction, white hair, cane, eyes like slate. He stepped aside without a word. She walked inside. The house was quiet, so quiet it echoed. Clean lines, bare walls. Everything smelled of cedar and stone. He showed her to a room, hers now with a wide bed, velvet curtains, a marble bathroom, and a small table set for one. "You'll have what you need," he said, voice low. "Meals will be delivered. A doctor will see you tomorrow. You may speak with your daughter once a day, by video. If you need anything, speak to Helen. She listens." Then he left. Leah stood in the center of the room, unable to move. This wasn't a prison, but it wasn't freedom either. Somewhere out there, Nora was asleep in a hospital bed Leah had never seen. Tucked in by strangers, monitored by machines. Her tiny face lit by overhead fluorescents instead of nightlights. And here Leah stood, brushed, dressed, catalogued, purchased, and still nameless in the eyes of the man who now technically owned her time, her body, and her silence. She didn't cry. Instead, she stepped back, slipped off the heels, and unzipped the gown with care. She folded it with methodical precision, placing it on the chair like someone preserving evidence. Then she pulled on the thick robe from the bedpost and climbed under the covers. The sheets smelled of cedar and clean linen. The mattress adjusted beneath her weight like memory foam designed to embrace. But comfort didn't mean rest. Her eyes remained open long after the lights dimmed. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It was padded, built not to protect but to contain. Morning came slowly. There was no sunrise, just the absence of night. The curtains filtered all light to a soft gray glow, and when Leah finally stirred, for a brief moment she forgot where she was. The bed felt too soft, her muscles too rested. Then it all returned, not in fragments, but as a solid mass. The auction, the car ride, the sterile contract, the man, this house. She lay still, staring at the ceiling. Her body ached in places. She'd ignored the night before, her back, her neck. The sides of her feet where the shoes had pressed too tightly. Her fingertips throbbed from gripping herself through panic. When she sat up, the blanket fell into her lap like water. The room looked exactly as it had the night before, clean, curated, and soulless. No clutter, no warmth. Near the window, a tray had appeared while she slept. She hadn't heard the door open, hadn't heard anyone come in. Yet there it was, breakfast arranged with hotel-like perfection, oatmeal dusted with berries, a soft-boiled egg, a cup of tea, a glass of water. No note, no explanation, just silence. Leah rose slowly. She washed her face in the bathroom and changed into the gray lounge clothes, hanging neatly in the wardrobe. The fabric was soft, high quality. Everything fit perfectly, like it had. Then measured against her without her knowing. Even the tags had been removed. She ate in silence, spooning slow bites, her eyes drifting to the window. With every chew, her thoughts wandered to Nora. Had someone brushed her hair that morning? Did she eat something warm? Was she asking where her mother had gone? The questions didn't come like waves, they came like thorns. Small, piercing, endless. When she finished eating, Leah began to move, not with purpose, but to keep the stillness from swallowing her. She paced the room, took in the details she hadn't noticed before. The smooth lines of the furniture, the way every object seemed placed rather than lived with. No family photos, no dust, no signs of life, except for one thing. A small shelf. Near the desk held a black and white photo of a young boy standing beside a wooden treehouse. He looked about 10 with a baseball cap turned backward and a gap-toothed grin. Leah didn't know him, but the photo had been placed with care. Not decoration, memory. At exactly 9 a.m., a knock came. Leah opened the door to find a woman in a pale blue uniform, her gray-streaked hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her name tag read Helen. She didn't smile, but her eyes held a kind of quiet steadiness. "Miss James," she said, "I'll take you to the medical wing." Leah's stomach clenched at the word medical. Still, she nodded and followed. They walked in silence. The house opened around them, long halls with oak floors, tall glass windows that framed the snowy, landscape like artwork. A few modern paintings dotted the walls, but nothing personal. No warmth, just curated quiet. It felt like walking through someone's idea of life, not life itself. They arrived at a small clinic tucked in the lower wing of the house. It smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Inside, a man in his 60s greeted her. He had kind eyes and introduced himself as Dr. Harlan. He didn't ask personal questions. He didn't act curious. He simply conducted a thorough, quiet examination, vital signs, blood samples, a quick scan. "Any complications during your first pregnancy?" he asked gently. "None," Leah said, voice hoarse. He nodded. "You're healthy. This will be straightforward. We prefer minimal stress, meals, gentle activity, a peaceful routine." He didn't mention the man who bought her. She didn't ask Dot afterward. Helen escorted her back to her room. And so the routine began. Each morning, a fresh tray would appear by the window. Oatmeal, fruit, eggs, never more, never less. No one knocked. No one lingered. Sometimes Helen would come with reminders, an afternoon walk, a reading hour in the solarium, quiet time in the creative lounge. Leah followed the rhythm because it gave her something to hold on to. Once a week, she was granted a 10-minute video call with Nora. Her daughter looked well, even happy, sitting on a plush chair beside a nurse with soft eyes. She held her teddy bear tightly and waved at the screen. "Mommy, they let me draw on the wall," she giggled. Leah smiled. "That's wonderful, baby." But every time the screen faded to black, Leah's heart cracked all over again. Nora was safe, but no longer hers, not fully. She lived now in a digital window, halfway across the silence. Walter, the man who'd bought her, did not return, not for days, not for weeks. Sometimes she glimpsed him, a silhouette down the hall, his limp steady, cane tapping gently as he walked. He moved like a man who didn't believe in being seen. Leah didn't speak to him. He didn't approach her, so she stayed busy. She read from the small library. She took long, measured walks along the property line, always within the fence. She wrote letters she never sent. She started knitting, though she'd never done it before. Helen had brought her soft yarn, and her fingers learned slowly. 2 weeks passed. Then one evening, sitting in the reading room, a thick plaid blanket draped over her knees, fire crackling nearby, she heard a voice. "I always liked that one," he said. She looked up. James stood by the door, his cane held loosely at his side, eyes unreadable. "I placed that book there years ago," he continued. "No one ever picked it up." Leah said nothing. She closed the book gently. He walked in, sat across from her. "I didn't expect you to read." "Why?" she asked, calm. He tilted his head. "Most in your position don't." She didn't flinch. Just looked him in the eye. "I meant no offense," he added. "Only you're different." He said his name, James Holloway. It meant nothing to her. He stayed a while, not speaking, not prying, just present. Then he left with a simple line, "If you need anything, tell Helen." And slowly, after that, he began to return, with books, puzzles, bowls of fruit. Not often, not long, but his presence changed from distant to curious. One afternoon she asked, "Why me?" He didn't look at her, just stared out the window. "You didn't cry," he said. She blinked. "Back there," he added. "When the bidding started, you didn't cry, you stood still." I respected that. The word struck her like ice. Respect. In the days that followed, he spoke more. About his late wife, his son, his work, his grief. Leah listened. She didn't trust it. Not yet, but something inside her shifted. Because when she touched her belly now, flat but waiting, she didn't just feel fear anymore. She felt something else too, something almost like hope. One evening, as snow feathered against the windows, James entered Leah's room carrying a small, old radio. "This was my son's," he said quietly. "He played jazz every night, said it helped him sleep." He set it down and left. Leah turned the knob. A warm saxophone note filled the room. Gentle drums followed. The music didn't demand anything. It simply filled the silence. Wrapped in a blanket, Leah sat by the window, hand resting on her stomach. The snow was soft tonight, the kind that muffled the world. For the first time, the quiet didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a beginning. Spring arrived subtly in the mountains. Not with bloom, but with small retreats. The wind less harsh, the snow thinner, sunlight staying longer in the sky. Leah noticed. She rose earlier. Walked farther, past the frost-bitten garden to the hill beyond the western edge. One morning, she spotted a wildflower forcing its way between two stones. She crouched, fingers hovering above it. "Still here," she whispered. Her body had begun to shift. Her steps slower, her breath shorter. A growing heaviness in her hips, her chest, and in her heart, something else. Not fear, not duty, connection. At night, lying on her side, she would whisper to the baby. Promises no one else would hear. James came more often now, sometimes with books, sometimes with silence. One day, he brought her a herb garden in clay pots. "You seem like someone who needs to grow things," he said, then disappeared down the hall. Another time, a scarf appeared, thick wool, hand-stitched. "I made it during the pandemic," he later admitted. She hadn't believed him until he described the mistakes in the weave. It wasn't perfect. That made it real. They spoke more now, though always softly. He told her about vineyards in Spain, a machine he once designed in Qatar, a son he lost, a wife taken too suddenly. He never asked her for her story. Maybe he thought he already knew it. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled over the reading room carpet, she asked, "Do you miss it?" "What? Life before this?" He looked down. "I miss certainty." "Not the noise," she nodded. Understood more than she wanted to admit. That evening, she found a manila envelope on her pillow. Inside, a revised contract. After the baby, she could stay. Nora could return. She would be cared for, safe. All she had to do was give up the child, completely. The room shrank around her. The walls leaned in. Her fingers trembled as she held the page. That night, she walked out to the fire pit. In her hand, the contract. In her chest, fury. She struck a match and fed the flame. The paper curled. Ink dissolved. Promises vanished into ash. James found her there, staring into embers. "I'm not for sale," she said. "And my child's not your solution." He looked tired, but didn't argue. Just left. She didn't see him for 3 days. Then, one night, she woke to find him in the armchair by the window. "You were right," he said. She waited. "I thought walls kept me safe," he continued. "But all they did was keep people out. If you want to leave after the birth," he added, "you'll have everything. No conditions." She stepped closer. "You didn't need a wall," she whispered, placing a hand on his arm. "You needed a door." For the first time, he didn't hide behind silence, and Leah. No longer behind fear. Leah stood in the kitchen, cradling a warm mug between her palms when James entered, his shirt wrinkled from sleep. "You're up early," he said, sliding a second cup her way. "Couldn't sleep," she murmured. They sat in silence, steam rising between them. The table felt like a border they couldn't yet cross. "I had new papers drawn up," James finally said. She didn't flinch. She'd known this was coming. "The contract's been rewritten. Lawyers' clarity," they said. "It's not binding." "Clarity for who?" she asked, her voice cold. He left the folder on her nightstand. No pressure. But its presence lingered like a storm cloud. Leah tried to escape it. She read, walked the garden, but by nightfall, the weight was too much. She read it. The contract offered her comfort, Nora's return, security. But it demanded her surrender no rights to the child she carried. With trembling hands, Leah tore the document in half, then again and again. James found her later, sitting amid the shredded pieces. "I'm not for sale," she said. "And this child isn't part of the deal." His face held no anger, only exhaustion. "I thought I was giving you something solid. You offered a cage with velvet lining." He nodded. "I won't bring it up again." He kept his word, but distance crept back in. Their conversations shrank. Even the house felt quieter, colder. Helen noticed too. Her glances lingered, her voice softer. Then, one stormy afternoon, Leah saw James walking among the orchard trees, hand resting on the bark like it might speak to him. That night, she found him at the piano, fingers on the keys but silent. "You said you stopped believing in permanence," she said gently. "But maybe you stopped believing in forgiveness too." He looked at her, startled. "If you want to share anything with me," she said, "make it real, not paper, not power. Just real." He hesitated. "I don't know how." "Then let's learn." The wall between them cracked, not with drama, but understanding. In the days that followed, James brought her little things: books, warm bread, a handmade scarf. No mention of the baby. But he noticed when her feet swelled and left a glider in the nursery without saying a word. One morning, as the world hinted at spring, he asked if she'd like to take a drive. They ended up at a modest vineyard nestled in a sleepy valley. The air smelled of soil and lemons. James laughed with the workers, drank from clay mugs, looked younger somehow. On the drive back, Leah turned to him. "You looked free today." He didn't respond right away. "That's who I was before I built the walls." She reached for his hand. "And who you still are." There were no contracts that night. Just quiet, and a blanket folded beside her pillow. At 2 a.m. it began. Leah awoke in searing pain. "It's time," she gasped. James drove through the mountain roads, calm but pale. "I'm here," he kept whispering. "You're not alone." At the clinic, light sliced the air like a scalpel. Nurses moved quickly. Dr. Harlan arrived. James never left her side. She gripped his hand, pushed through waves of fire, thought of Nora, of cold nights in the Honda, of survival and promises. Then, with one final cry, the room fell still until a piercing wail filled the air. "It's a boy," a nurse said. Her voice full of light. They laid him on Leah's chest. James touched the boy's head, then cradled him, tears running freely. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again." "No contracts," he whispered. "He'll know you. I promise." 3 days later, they returned to a home that no longer felt like a fortress. A nursery waited, soft blue walls, toys, blankets, and a rocking chair. "I built it 2 months ago," James said. "But I only knew yesterday who it was for." Nora returned days later, running into Leah's arms. Her laughter filled every hallway. Nora, as she now insisted being called again, became official big sister. James stumbled through fatherhood with clumsy grace, reading books, changing diapers backward, and showing up every time. Leah didn't leave. She wasn't asked to stay. She simply did. One evening, James stood before her, no ring, no grand gesture. "I want to ask you to stay, not for duty, not for Caleb, for love." She rose, took his hand, and smiled. "You don't need to ask. I'm already here." Later, Nora showed them a drawing, 4 stick figures beneath a yellow sun. A girl, a baby, a tall man, and a woman with curls. Above them, 3 bold words: "This is us." And in that moment, they all understood this wasn't a story of rescue. It was a story of becoming. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances and the quiet power of love.